Welcome to the One Idea podcast. Please like, share, subscribe, comment. Really appreciate you watching. Enjoy today's show with the legend Garry
Right, let's do
Tonon.
this shit. I'm here today with Garry Tonon. Doesn't need any introduction. BJ black belt under Tom DeBlas, Danaher Death Squad. Too many accolades in jiu-jitsu for me to list, and fought the who's who. Since 2018, 5-0 career in MMA now, and fighting out of one championships. What's it like transitioning over from jiu-jitsu to MMA?
The transition's been interesting. It was difficult. I've mentioned this a few times in the sense that I had already achieved excellence elsewhere. So because of that, once you kind of know what it's like to be elite at something, like to be good at something, it's when you transition to go try to be good at something else, you kind of understand how bad you actually are, more so than if you never got good at anything else. I guess when I first started jiu-jitsu, it was kind of like meaningless how bad I was, because I couldn't really put it in perspective. I didn't actually know. So like you just show up to practice every day, and you try moves, and when they don't work, you struggle and you try again. But like when I was going into this other sport in MMA, whenever I would go to practice a new skill or something, and like I couldn't really get my hands on it. Like I couldn't really find a way to make it work quickly in sparring. Sometimes skill development, especially for MMA. I mean, I don't see me doing something that I learned for 3 to 6 months sometimes, and I can tell that like while I'm trying to do it, it's not right. It makes it harder, because I just have higher expectations for myself. Even though like it was something that I wasn't accustomed to doing. So I should really, cut myself a little bit of slack. But at the same time, because I started like at 26, I kind of had to get on an accelerated path to getting good. So I did kind of need a certain drive for excellence compared to just kind of like, just going to practice and, kind of doing some moves and that was good enough. I really needed to focus and try to do everything that I could to get good very fast, because, I was going to get thrown in with sharks, not too long after,
Yeah, you were never going to get easy fights to begin with, were you? Because of how good you are at jiu-jitsu. I was watching you striking and watching it. Like I was watching your fights again, and then watching you striking, because that's easier for me to watch than your jiu-jitsu. That's way off my level. And just noticing your progression and your early fights where you're striking mainly, aren't you? Was that a conscious decision to show people that like I'm here to strike as well, I'm here to fight, or was it just did you just flow, or did you go game plan?
So I mean, as a secondary thing, I guess it was nice to show people that I could strike, but my primary concern was building my own confidence. So it's just a little bit different, like, going out there and performing under competition, under competition stress, than just like doing it in training and in sparring. So, even though like I practice a ton of striking in sparring, and that was a big part of what we worked on leading up to these fights, because it's the biggest deficit that I have. Even though we did a ton of that, it's different when you actually go to try to put it into practice with 4-ounce gloves with another guy who's trying to knock your head off. That's not typically the conditions that you're sparring under. So I wanted to make sure that if at any point in my career I had to be standing in front of somebody and throw punches, I felt comfortable doing so. So it was I made it a little bit of a point, not so much to show other people that I could do it, but I guess to show myself that I could do it. I didn't want the first time that I had to open up and stand in front of somebody to strike to be when I had like a championship fight where I had no other option. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Last thing I want to do is to put myself into a corner and now have to use this skill that I've never used in competition before. Mm-hmm. So I really wanted to make sure that I could I could go out there and, handle myself, stay relatively comfortable, take a couple shots and give a couple shots. And I needed to know that I was competent there. That was really important to me for my later confidence in other fights. And it's not to say that I I don't know, past any major milestone that suggests that I've got striking down or anything like that. But I certainly have built a degree of confidence getting out there doing that, to the point where I feel like when I go to fight, I can kind of just try to win now and not have to worry about proving to myself that I can, trade strikes with someone. I don't really need to prove that anymore. It's still a part of, fighting, like the idea that I'm just going to get in there and not throw any punches and submit people. Well, it worked out well in my last fight, I guess, but I threw a couple kicks, I think, but I don't think I threw. But the idea that that's going to happen every fight I think it's a little ridiculous. So it's still a huge part of what we do, but and it's still going to be a part of me when I fight. But it's not something I'm looking to just test the waters on anymore. I want to take the fight to the ground at some point and submit people, and it's not like people know that. So I don't think anybody was under any impression that I would have wanted to do anything different. So yeah, man, that's where I'm at.
But I was impressed with your striking now, how much it's come on in such a short period of time. You from your first fight to not the last one so much, but the others, your kicks have improved so much. I've seen you switching stances. Did you switch stances because of wrestling? Did you have the other foot forward in wrestling, or does it not bother you when you go for stats?
When I wrestle, I think I tend to stay with my right foot forward, probably. I've always been one to kind of, switch stances in wrestling, I think. But I don't really think it has much to do with the fact that I'm doing it in striking. For striking, what I find is that when I stay in one stance for long periods of time, and so I'll talk about it from a standpoint of what I believe about the sport, and then a standpoint of experiential knowledge. So as far as experience is concerned, when I actually get in there and spar and I just stand in one stance, I find that it tends to make me relatively predictable. There's only so many combinations. I mean, of course, you can get very creative, don't get me wrong, but there's only so many things that you're going to see from each stance. There's kind of these hallmark moves that you're going to see, for example, you're going to see a lot more of a, kind of like a 1-2 situation when you're going to stand in a conventional stance. People looking for a lot of overhands in a conventional stance. And we call it kenkiatsu and ayatsu, by the way. So if I'm in southpaw versus southpaw, you're going to see a lot of batting at the lead glove and then trying to score the rear hand, right? It's a game that most strikers are fairly familiar with as to what we're trying to accomplish, right? And even when you add in the kicks, it's all right, so now we're southpaw versus southpaw, or what we would refer to as kenkiatsu, and now you're going to expect a high kick from my rear leg or a body kick from my rear. It's all becomes relatively predictable. So by switching stances, I feel like some of the guys that are a little bit more experienced when it comes to striking, it doesn't allow their mind to just read what's going on the entire time. I think if I just approach something in a conventional stance, especially if I spend a round sparring with someone and throwing whatever it is that I normally throw from that particular stance, it starts to become so easy for them to figure out what's going on, and I tend to get hit more. So I found that by switching stances, it was a little bit more disruptive in the thought processes of my opponents. I will say this, in my earlier fights, there's a lot of random stance switching. There's ways to switch stances with a purpose. I'm intentionally trying to lead you onto strikes and things like that. I think in my previous fights, it had a lot more to do with evasion. It had a lot more to do with just me trying to be as elusive as possible and hard to hit. But in future fights, I hope to be able to use it to lead people into takedowns and strikes, and do it a little bit more of an intelligent manner. Now, as far as the sport as a whole is concerned, as far as stance switching, and not even just my experience, just from what I can understand about the sport, I would say the majority of the high-level strikers in the sport have an ability to switch stance and are comfortable in both, even if they choose to use one particular stance most of the time. You'll see at least one fight or something where something goes wrong. Maybe they get kicked a bunch in their forward leg, and they need to move that leg back and switch stances, or they're getting hit in a particular, and they tend to switch. And I just think it's an important skill to have. Is it necessary for me to switch the way that I do? No, I don't think everybody needs to do that. But I do think it's important for everybody to be comfortable in both stances. And one of the ways that it makes it easy for me to be that way is to do it all the time. And if I'm doing it all the time in training, then I tend to do it when I fight. So that's just, a little bit of a story of the experience of why I do it, or the experience and why I tend to do it for me. And then just my understanding of the sport. So, yeah.
It's something I struggle with, switching stances. Like, maybe it's because I'm so old now, I can't do it.
Sure.
But go on.
I was just gonna say, you just get really comfortable, right? Like, I mean, even me, if I start sparring and I'm working on something from a particular stance, and it becomes very comfortable for me. Like, as soon as I go to switch stances, it's uncomfortable. Or maybe I bring a southpaw in to spar, and now the angles are different because when I switch stances, it's opposite on both sides, right? So it's just, all right, now my rear hand's my right hand, or my rear hand's my left hand, and it changes things a little bit. And maybe my favorite punches from that stance are no longer my favorite punches, and I have to have another one. And yeah, so it's definitely a difficult thing. I can totally understand why people stray away from the idea of stance switching.
Mm-hmm. Who's your striking coach, Garry?
Mostly John Danaher. So John has been working with a bunch of mixed martial artists for years. I mean, before he was even really like a high level, well, he was coaching jiu-jitsu, but he wasn't like coaching high level athletes in jiu-jitsu. Before he was doing that, he was doing a lot of mixed martial arts coaching. He was a coach for Matt Serra. He was a coach for GSP. He was a coach for Weidman at a period of time in his career. So he worked with a lot of really high level guys. And although he probably primarily focused on the grappling components of those fights, I think he started to pay attention and get a broader understanding of what was going on. And John's always just been a general student of martial arts. So like, John's big on watching tape on boxing, kickboxing, Muay Thai, whatever it is. He watches that tape as much as he watches the various, jiu-jitsu tape and judo and wrestling that he watches. So I think over years, he's developed quite a decent understanding of it. I've gone to other people before to try to kind of springboard the striking element of things. Back when I was like maybe 24, 25, I told John, I was like, hey man, I'm kind of interested in doing this, this MMA stuff. And I don't know if John was 100% on board with me doing it, to be honest. I think he saw a future for me in jiu-jitsu in terms of just like competing, right? And I think he saw that as like an easier path, and fighting's very risky, and it's like hard on your body and things. And I don't know. I don't necessarily know if I had a kid, like if I would be like, yeah, I want you to be a fighter, buddy, so it's like not necessarily something you wish on like the people that are close to you, I guess. So I think at first he kind of like, he would tell me like, yeah, sure, we'll get started. But like, we never really kind of like kicked off. So I'm all right. Like before I like get started with John, I'm going to go try to like find somebody to like hit pads with, or like kind of figure things out. And a bunch of guys that I would, would hold pads for me and things like, I didn't get a sense that like they really understood the sport as a whole, or at least if they did, they didn't do a good job of communicating it to me. So I'll give you a brief example. So like John, when I first started doing jiu-jitsu, and when, many new people come in, he often tries to explain to them the general path that jiu-jitsu is trying to take. All right. And if you don't understand that early on, what tends to happen is you start learning random moves for about a year. And then as you watch people train and watch competitions and you train yourself and you practice these moves, over about a year and a half, you start to figure out what's happening, and you go, okay,
Yeah.
kind of understand the sport, right? But John does a good job on like day one, kind of giving you the understanding of what the sport is, so that as you start learning, subsequent moves, you already have the picture of the puzzle put together already, and it's easy to start clipping pieces in. I didn't feel like I was getting that from a lot of people that were doing striking exercises for me. I felt like they were giving random puzzle pieces, and it's like, oh, here you go, here's another piece, and it's hard to put together, especially in the context of not sparring frequently. So what John did with jiu-jitsu is he's like, hey, listen, we got like a pretty basic 4-part system here, okay? You're going to try to take a guy down, okay? You're going to try to pass his legs. You're going to try to pin him. And then you're eventually going to try to look for an opportunity to submit the guy through some extension of limbs, your neck, your arms, your legs, right? So it's a pretty simple understanding of the sport, but it's so important, especially for somebody who's coming in brand new and doesn't know what's going on. I mean, it's hard to put ourselves in a place like after training for a long period of time where you know nothing. But knowing nothing and walking into a jiu-jitsu school and being like, hey, why don't you just roll? It's crazy. Yeah. You have no idea you don't understand what you're supposed to do anywhere, right? But if you understood that simple 4-part system, I mean, maybe the first day you're not going to quite 100% mentally get it. But after like a week or 2 weeks of seeing people do it, you're like, oh, I get it, right? Like I know what I'm supposed to do. You might not be able to do it, but you at least, when you're mounted, you're like, okay, like I kind of get an idea. I don't want to be here. I want to get to a position where I can, So I kind of felt that way with striking is there wasn't a really good, nobody was painting the picture for me. And John does a lot better job doing that, I think, than a lot of other people. And John also recognized the fact that I told you this before. He also recognized that I had a very short period of time to get good. So when finally I was able to get John, to kick off like actual, sparring training, I think maybe after he saw me like doing like a bunch of boxing training upstairs with the guys and stuff for some period of time, I started to get the idea that, I actually wanted to do this. So after he finally started kicking it off, he started putting the pieces together. One thing is we had to spar every day. Now, initially, we couldn't spar every day do full sparring every day because I just was too stupid. I didn't know what I was doing. So it had to be like limited sparring. There'd be like certain things I was allowed to throw and certain things I wasn't. Most of the things that I was doing was defensive at the beginning. So like limited sparring where like I almost never was the person that got to hit. I was defense and I had to block punches. I had to evade punches, this, that, and the other thing. And that's kind of how we got started. But like early lessons, just to give people a rough idea of what I'm talking about with, most guys, when you first get on the pads or you start talking to a boxing coach, it's like, okay, we're going to work on your jab. And then you're going to take it private with the guy and you're going to do the jab for an hour. And I'm not going to say that's not productive. Like it's definitely productive. You can get a better jab, and that's important. And I could definitely improve the mechanics of my punches and kicks and things. And by all means, I'm not going to pretend like I'm perfect with that sort of thing. But there are far more important things to learn if you're going to be fighting somebody in 6 months or 3 months, whatever the case may be. It's like, hey, listen, like if you can just get the rough idea of a jab, we got more important things to worry about. Like, hey, what distance can you stand in front of your opponent to make sure you're not going to get your head knocked off with a kick? Like that's kind of important.
It's just big, isn't it?
Yeah, practicing being in and out of that distance so that you understand, like, hey, when am I safe and when am I in danger? All right. And learning those different distances. That was like one of the first lessons that we worked on with John. So when I'm talking about these sorts of things, that's what I'm referring to. Is like there's these broader concepts of the sport that I think he did a good job painting a picture for very early. Understanding like different defensive principles. Like, hey, if you're going to be standing in front of somebody and you're in a range to get hit, we're probably going to be moving our head or we're going to be moving our feet so that you're a moving target and you're not getting your head knocked off, right? So even though that's a very simple concept, it's just not explained by almost anybody when you go to do a striking,
I've never had anything like that from a coach in striking, even boxing coaches, and so a lot of Muay Thai coaches I've had have been like, how do I improve my kick? And they're like, go and kick that bag 200 times.
Yeah.
No, I'm just going to get better at doing it badly. So.
Yeah, so there's a lot, man. That's a very tiny example of what I'm talking about, but that's what makes me go, hey, listen, I know that John wasn't a world champion boxer or Muay Thai fighter or anything like that. And doesn't have much, he did do some Muay Thai when he was in New Zealand, I think when he was a kid, but he doesn't have much experience in that, but I still am very confident in his ability to see the way that the sport has unfolded and is put together. He's got quite a bit of experience in that. So I trust him as a coach.
Yeah. How did you end up there? Because is Tom affiliated with Henzo's gym, or how did you end up as you're like one of the mainstays now of that Danaher Death Squad, aren't you, really? So how did you end up there in the basement, so to speak, at Henzo's?
So, what was I going to say? So, Tom is a affiliate originally of Ricardo Almeida. So, Ricardo Almeida came when Henzo opened a school in the U.S. Ricardo came with Henzo, and I think he was originally they were both originally from some sort of Gracie Barra. Right.
Yep.
I think that was like the main, gym in Brazil or whatever. So I guess, Henzo knew he was going to need some help, like teaching or whatever. And he asked Ricardo to come with him. So I think originally Ricardo was kind of like teaching with Henzo and like training under Henzo. And then eventually, at some point he opened his own gym, probably, to make money and to, start going down his own path as a coach. Right. So I don't know what year, I don't know if I'm going to be too here, but at some point, Tom came along. I think Tom started jiu-jitsu when he was like 19 years old or something, and started working with Ricardo. And at the time, back then, they were working relatively closely with each other. I think Henzo and Ricardo, like, I'm pretty sure, I just can't remember exactly what year it was, like I said, but I'm pretty sure back then they were all getting ready for pride fights and stuff like that. So I think that Tom came in right around that time. So he was very closely linked with Henzo as well. I mean, it's part of an affiliation anyway. Like, Ricardo's is an affiliate of Henzo's, right? But they were around each other quite a bit. So Tom got very close to Henzo as well as Ricardo, and while he was training, and he became like, a training partner for them, leading up to their fights and things. And then he, eventually opened his own school. I ended up at that school. And, after working with Tom for, several years, he kind of wanted to start fast tracking me to training, elsewhere, not just with him. He felt as though like it was good. He had a relatively new gym. He felt as though it was good for me to be training there. And like, I obviously had him as an instructor and like a couple other guys that he had brought over that were maybe Ricardo's students as well, who were like belts and things that I could train with. But he kind of felt like, hey man, if you're going to get good, we got to have you have some other good training partners and some different instructors and things. So he had me go to Ricardo's like once a week, I think. So they had like a Saturday training session. So all their pros would kind of get together, whether it was MMA guys or, jiu-jitsu guys, whatever it was, they all kind of go into the same room and we start training. And intermittently, whenever I would go, I would see, Henzo would be there. And so that was like maybe my first experience, meeting Henzo. I wasn't training at Henzo's at all. So that was probably like somewhere around 4 years, 3 years, maybe. Well, when I started training at Ricardo's, it was probably like 2 to 3 years into training. And as I progressed, I continued to start to seek out more and more places to train within like our affiliation. Tom had a pretty full schedule, but he wasn't doing anything in the mornings. His school was growing rapidly, but it didn't really have the student base to be doing stuff like like midday and in the morning yet. It wasn't training sessions like that. Most of the guys that were training under Tom had regular jobs, because it's not like the city where, like in New York, like it's super easy to have a morning and afternoon session because people have all kinds of work schedules there, and you have so many people coming in and out the door that, I mean, hell, John, for some period of time, John's morning class had more people in it than night classes. So
Wow.
that's to suggest, and that's to suggest that, you know, people are able to work that into their schedule, you know. Whereas I think back down south where, you know, where Tom was, that just wasn't possible. So anyway, I would try to find places I could train in the mornings, like Ricardo would have some morning training. And then I think Fridays, Tom didn't have training. So I would schedule training sessions with our guys, and then I would go bounce to like Ricardo's or like a Henzo affiliate that had training on a Friday. So I would just print out all the schedules of like everybody's gym and be like, okay, like where am I going to be when, so I can get the most possible training in. I can do morning and then I can do night, you know, this, that, and the other thing. So once I started doing that, I kind of branched out and had a lot more experience with different people. And eventually Frankie Edgar was getting ready, I want to say, for one of the BJ Penn fights. And he was going down to Henzo's to get training in with John, I think like maybe once a week or once every couple weeks or something like that. Because on Mondays at Henzo's, they would have all the pro MMA guys meet up to do like their grappling, and John would kind of run that program. It wasn't at a stage back then where there was like pro jiu-jitsu guys, like that didn't really exist. I mean, I guess I was as close as you could get to that, but you know, I don't know if I was really making money doing jiu-jitsu back then. So, you know, I would show up to those practices as much as I could. With Frankie, you know, he had offered to like drive me down. So once Frankie stopped going for whatever reason, I don't know if it was the end of his camp or, you know, I think at some point he stopped working with him. It's a far drive, you know, obviously to go. It's probably like an hour and a half, 2 hours from where I was, and where Frankie was like Tom's River. I was even a little bit further south than that, like another 10, 15 minutes in Lenoka Harbor. So it's hard to like get to New York from there. I would say as that all was unfolding, I started going to college at Rutgers University. So when I started going to Rutgers University, I was a little bit closer to the city. So it made a little bit more sense for me to pop in there every so often, like a little bit more often. It was still tough because it's super expensive. Just to get to the city alone is probably going to be like a $50 fare.
It's expensive, isn't it?
Yeah.
I've not been. Yeah, it's somewhere I'd like to go, but I've not visited New York yet.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to even get there if you're close to there. You know what I mean? Like, forget about like what prices of things in the city are. Like, even if I decide I'm not going to buy anything like food or drink or anything in the city, it's like, man, in New Jersey, there's tolls, man, like heavy tolls. I mean, yeah, to drive to New York from where I was probably like close to a $10 toll, or actually, sorry, from New Brunswick, it would probably be like a $6-7 toll or something. And then to just cross the bridge into New York was $15. And then you got to pay for parking when you get there, you know? And it's like, oh, Garry, why don't you take the train? And it's like, well, in order to get to the train, I have to park somewhere and pay for parking. That's going to cost me like $30 to park. It was like a no-win situation. Like you were going to pay a lot of money no matter what you did. So I could only go so often. But I would, you know, scrape up as much money as I could, and I would do whatever I could to train. So I popped in, you know, once a week or so, probably that Monday class. Every once in a while, I'd go to the gi and do some other class, you know, throughout the week. And eventually I met Eddie Cummings, and he was doing like a little bit more training in the mornings and stuff like that. And he had invited me to come train in those classes and things. And I started being more consistent, and I started working with John more and more. But I'd say like the critical moment where I really started like developing a relationship with John was probably during ESP's camp with Nick Diaz. And he brought me up to train with George for that fight in Montreal. And that was the first time I actually had discussions with John, and like he talked to me about like what my aspirations were and things, because prior to that I was just another dude who, you know, there's tons of visitors in New York, you know, just another guy who's coming in for training, right? So there was no clear sense of direction for me with him as a coach or anything like that. So he started asking me questions and things and got a better feel for like what I wanted to do and what I was doing. And prior to that, whenever John would teach, I would just kind of like hide in the corner and like watch. Like, after he was done, he would go train with like Brian Glick, and I just kind of like watch from behind the pillar and like try to learn. But I never really interacted because he was a very intimidating like kind of guy. Like, you didn't like get to like ask questions like during training. Like you could, but you couldn't. Like you had to say it in the right way. And like if he wasn't in a particularly good mood, he might just ignore you. So it was like a very weird, you know, thing. So I didn't feel like I was like able to like be, you know, right there and talk like the way that now we have like a real working relationship, and everybody in the team kind of like gets together before and after class and we talk and stuff. But back then it was not like that. So it took me a while to like get to the point where I could even be close to John to have these discussions and stuff. So, but that's kind of how it all unfolded. It's kind of a long story, but that's how I got
No. So do you reckon that really moved your game on loads when how he changes how you think about jiu-jitsu? Was that a big step change for you, or?
Yeah, I think it was a pretty smooth transition. I mean, I think that by training at Tom's and things, like number one, first thing is like my father wasn't around much when I was a kid. I didn't really have too many male role models. There was a few people in my family that happened to be good male role models, so that was good. You know, I had some positive influence there, but it wasn't something that was around me every day. So when I came to Tom's around like 14, 15, like the first thing that needed to get sorted out, I think, aside from like actual jiu-jitsu technique, one was like kind of getting my head wrapped around like who I was going to be as a man, you know, and like, hey, like what am I going to be working towards? Like, what do I actually want out of life? Like all of these kind of questions and things started to get answered because Tom did a really good job mentoring me in that way. He saw, a lot of potential, and he's like, hey, you know, I think this kid could be good. And, you know, he'd have conversations with me and push me in the right direction and say, hey man, you know, you could be really good at this. Like, let's keep hammering away at it. If you keep showing up and like you keep doing the work, like, you know, and so mentally he put me in a good place to succeed, I think. And there's other things too that I'm not mentioning that are like just really important lessons that without having like a strong male role model, I wouldn't like really understand, whether it be work ethic stuff, whether it be like confidence building, like things that I might have had like a light idea of that Tom as a competitive athlete just elevated. So it put me in a really good mental space before I showed up at a place like Henzo's where I met John, to be able to like absorb what was going on. Because I think it's hard sometimes, and it certainly would have been hard for me not having that confidence, not having a good, strong mind, to walk into a room like the room that John runs and just get told you're a retard every day and somehow still be able to handle that and get better. You know, it's just not an easy thing. A lot of people struggle with it. You know, a lot of people get discouraged, and it's a much higher level room. Like it's not really built for the basic student. You know, it's somebody that comes in brand new and has never done jiu-jitsu before. So it was a springboard, man. You know, I did my baseline work to build a foundation, and then you know, I worked myself all the way up till probably just before black belt was right around when I was really working with John on any consistent basis. Prior to that, it was mostly Tom, and then probably for like 5 years or so. And then I was, like I said, I kind of started to take control over my own training, and I was traveling all over the place to try to find instruction. So at the time, I didn't have like one consistent guy that was telling me exactly what to do. It was kind of, you know, I was a later brown belt, and at that point in time, I just took it upon myself. I was like, okay, I got to do this, and this to get better, right? And then finally, like I said, found John, and we started moving in the direction of me being a black belt, and you know what I was going to accomplish there. And that changed things quite a bit, because everything that I had done prior to that was more about the positional aspects of the sport. I mean, we certainly worked on submission holds. It's not like Tom never drilled any submissions with us.
Mm-hmm.
But there was an array of submissions that perhaps like he didn't use as frequently, things like arm bars and stuff like that, like, guillotines and things that I had never really used. Like it seemed like the main goal here was like, hey, I'm going to find a way to get to the guy's back and strangle him. And that was what I interpreted from everything that I had learned thus far. I was pretty good at it. That's why they call me the Lion Killer, like I was strangling a lot of people from the back. And that was my system, before I had the systems that John would work on with us from all these different submission situations. My system was, hey, I'm going to do everything I can from every position to try to expose your back. And when I get to your back, I'm going to hit you with a rear naked choke. Even in the gi, I mean, I did a little bit of lapel strangles and stuff too, but that was pretty much it. That was my idea of my concept of jiu-jitsu. And then when I started working with John, we started exploring a lot more submission situations. I probably started with, a lot of people know him for leg locks and stuff now, but I actually started with John. The first project that John worked on with me was getting a high elbow guillotine. We weren't even really he wasn't even really that concerned with the legs. He was like, listen, number 1 and number 2 submissions, no gi and MMA. He's like, it's going to be rear naked chokes and guillotines because it just involves the neck, and that's what you got to work on. So, I worked on it for a little bit, and I'm like, all right, John, I'm ready for like the next thing. And he's like, I think like, 1 out of 50 people with a guillotine. He's like, I don't think you really know what you're doing yet. Like you really, really got to get this done. So like 6 months into it, like I started to finally kind of piece things together and understand what I was doing with that and submit people consistently with guillotines. And he's like, okay, now we can move on to this next thing. So it basically in summary, the move to working with John started making me much more precise with submission holds from a lot of different places, as opposed to just trying to get to the back and strangle. I suddenly saw jiu-jitsu as a possibility. I saw it as a possibility to finish people in many different ways instead of just one.
Mm-hmm. So you touched on when you were young, like, and your story is a really good one, isn't it? From you growing up, I've seen it on the ONE FC thing that you had ADHD as a kid, and then do you think that helped you to become who you are in jiu-jitsu, or was that against you? What do you think? Like, so sometimes I have problems, mental problems and things at times, and sometimes that focus that I get with it drives me along on things, and then sometimes it creates havoc in my life. What do you think for you?
I think it's a blessing and a curse. That's how I often describe it. I think that it made certainly my earlier life a little bit more difficult. I think that when it came to just regular everyday organizational skills and just whether it's attention stuff or whether it's just social skills that I had trouble with because of the level of impulsivity that I had and didn't understand. I didn't read people very well because I was kind of just focused on this thing. It's very hard for me to have a conversation with somebody and zero in on, hey, like, okay, what are their facial expressions and like, how's the tone of their voice changing? And when you say this particular thing, how are they responding to that stimuli? And where is the conversation going? Are you pissing the person off? Are you annoying them? Or like, are things going well and you're doing the right thing? Are you interrupting them every 5 seconds? Like, these are things that I actually actively have to think about that most people, I think, just kind of do naturally.
Same here.
Yeah, it's hard, man. It's really hard. So, I mean, as far as jiu-jitsu is concerned, I think the impulsivity leads to a lot more activity and a lot more spontaneous movement than perhaps someone who doesn't have the same type of mind that I have. So I do think it is a benefit in that regard. But in other regards, it's still a struggle, man. Like, there's a lot of times where I'm sitting there when John teaches a move and it's like there's 1,000 things bouncing around in my head, and I'm watching John teach a move and he gets through it twice. And then when he's done, I literally have no idea what just happened. Like, it's not it's not like I've suddenly solved the riddle and like every day as an adult, like I no longer like struggle with the issues that are associated with ADHD. I just have to do things a little differently, hell, like, maybe after he's done teaching, I watch, maybe one more time, I'll watch some other people do whatever it is that he just taught. And it provides time for me to think about it a little bit more critically. And then I get into starting to do the move, and I get a feel for it hands on. And then I do a good job of the way that my mind works instead of just doing everything straightforward, the way that it was taught to me. I'm immediately taking that lesson as soon as I feel like I kind of have it, and I'm going, okay, well, what's going to happen if the guy does this, and how can I add this into this other attack that I've been working on? And I tend to get a lot more spontaneous and creative because I'm not just able to settle on that one thing.
Yeah.
Everybody does things a little differently. Like, for example, I think George St. Pierre is a little obsessive compulsive. So
I follow him on Instagram, and yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah. So as opposed to ADHD, it's a little bit of the opposite I don't know if opposite's the right way to put it, but like he'll take a move quite literally, and like whatever it is that you showed him, he's going to obsess over every little detail of that move, and then think about it. He like air drills it sometimes, like while he's just standing. He'll go back to Montreal and practice it on training partners, and then come back. And that's his way of like getting better. It's like, hey, I was given this thing, and I'm just going to hammer away at that thing over and over and over again, and make sure that I have it like to the absolute best of my ability. Right. So everybody's got like a little different ways that they make it work for them and how they can get better. And for me, I think ADHD is definitely a part of it. And I think it leads to, like I said, a lot of spontaneity and creativity. So I'm happy for that, but it still makes me struggle in other areas. It's not like it's just this amazing thing that I don't have any problems with today.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I find ways. I'm a bit older. I'm quite a lot older than you. I find ways to mitigate my problems and put things in place to sort of get around it. They're still all there. I'm just better at stepping around the holes that are put in front of me. What's happening with one championship and you now? Do you know what fight you're gonna have next, or have you been in contact?
So, I mean, Chatri's talked to me recently, and he just kind of said like, hey man, we're trying to do our best to get you guys in here. But it's like, travel's just banned to a lot of those countries. So it's not even just the U.S. It's not even the U.S. to those countries. I think it's those countries allowing us in. I don't think the issue is that the U.S. won't fly there. I think the issue is that they won't let us through the border. So UFC, what they're doing is they're getting chartered flights for athletes to go to Abu Dhabi, which is their way of getting around things. And now I think like in a couple places like Las Vegas and maybe Florida and things that they're able to actually host events in the US, which is nice for them. But even when they're doing it outside the US and they're doing it in Abu Dhabi, the only reason they're able to do that is because they're doing a private flight. So like there are no flights to Abu Dhabi right now. Like you're not allowed to go there just as for fun, like on a vacation. So it works out for the UFC because they can get a chartered flight, and I don't know what the hell a private jet to Abu Dhabi costs. I'm going to go ahead and guess that it's expensive. But
yeah, I was looking at the cost of those the other week. Someone sent me a spreadsheet on it while I was trying to get out of Peru, but I can't remember what it is now. But it's quite a few $1,000s. Yeah,
I'm sure it's really expensive. So they fill that with, I don't know, 30 athletes, their cornermen, and then, I guess like various media personnel, right? So that's all well and good. I guess they can make it work as far as the prices are concerned, right? But the problem with that and one is it's like, okay, so like who do you really have on the American roster? You have like me, Eddie Alvarez, like there's a couple other of the Asian guys that train in the US. So like you got like Martin and like, so I mean, you're going to have a private jet for like 5 dudes, Sage Northcutt. Like, I mean, it's just not cost effective to do that. So even if they wanted to do something like the UFC is doing and they found a neutral country where they could travel. We could both travel to together and then like meet up. I think it would be like a monetary disaster, probably. This is all conjecture on my part. Like nobody said this to me. This is just me trying to put pieces together. I just think it would be real hard for them to do because the primary base of their athletes is in Asia as opposed to the UFC where most of their athletes are within somewhere, either Europe or the US where they can, transport everything.
Do you think you'll get a title shot next? Because I was looking at you're in the top 5 now, looking at the top 5. Christian Lee's lost to him twice. Kiyomi just lost to him. Stanley, he's on a 3-fight win streak with him 1. And then Tetsuya is in front of you, lost his last fight. So it's like you or Fan, I'd say you'd be up for the next shot.
Yeah, if things work out the way that I would think is most fair, I would say either me or Thon Lee would be the next contender for a title shot. I would think there's the one guy, the Russian guy that I think has fought Martin a couple times that also has like a pretty good record. So at any given point in time, they could put him in there too. But I mean, he's lost to him, I think, at least not twice. So again, it puts it in like a weird spot, but he's also probably right up there. Yeah, I mean, it could go either way. The tough part for me is like getting any other fight than the title is hard. Cause like, let's say, like you say, like, let's pair me and Thon Lee together. I'm game, but I'm sure Thon Lee doesn't want that fight. I'm sure he's saying to himself, like, well, I'm on a 3-fight win streak. I'm a pretty good striker. And I'd rather fight a guy like Martin, who is, kind of got like mediocre, I shouldn't say mediocre. Like he's got more all around skills, in a bunch of different areas. I'm probably going to be able to beat that guy, whereas he goes to fight me. And it's like, okay, like I'm pretty confident I could beat Garry in a striking battle. But if I get taken down at any given point and the guy fucking heel hooks me, that's the end of that fight. And it's a big, even though I'm early, it's the early stages of my mixed martial arts career, it's still a big risk for a lot of these guys to fight me. So somebody in a contender spot, they're not interested in taking that fight because it's very high risk, very low reward, I think. Right. Like they're already in the conversation. Like me and you are having the conversation right now. Like, oh yeah, Thon Lee could probably be in tight. So if we're having that conversation, I'm sure the organization's having that conversation. So if they're already in the conversation for a title shot, the last thing they want to do is take a fight with somebody who doesn't hold the title and then have the potential to get knocked back and then have to have, 2 more fights before they get the title shot again. So I think it's tough. I think it's going to be, it's going to be hard to get any other fight than the title right now. Well, there was one option that they gave, and I don't remember the name of the fighter. I would give it to you if I could remember. They were bringing in some guy who was 12-0 from another organization. Might be signed with them already. I'm quite sure that he is. So that guy would probably have been my next fight. And in this case, I mean, he's coming from a different organization, so he doesn't really have much say, right? So when he transfers over, he's kind of got to take whatever fights they give him. So that could be another possibility, but we'll see.
How come you chose one? I'm sure there was quite a few people after your signature.
Yeah, well, that's the funny part is you say that, right? And I had on numerous occasions I had put my name out there as like, hey guys, I'm interested in doing MMA. Like, you would think at some point then the word would get around to somebody to say like, hey, like, this is a pretty good prospect here. He's done quite a bit in the jiu-jitsu world. Like, we're probably going to want him on our roster. Like, he's got a big following, right? You would think that. Bellator, UFC, nothing. Numerous occasions I attempted to reach out to them, like specifically, not like me emailing somebody from Bellator, but like I would say like, hey, somebody from Bellator, I want to fight this guy, this, that, and the other thing. So they should know that I'm interested in fighting. I never got anything from Bellator, never got anything from the UFC. There was no attention at the beginning. What was I going to say? I had one person that was one organization that was interested in trying to get me, which was Ryzen, I think. And Ryzen, like the reason I didn't go that route because they were the first people to contact me. The reason I think I didn't go that route was because of the way they wanted to do things. They were like, I had a fight against this guy. It was a Japanese mixed martial artist. I want to say, let me see. I just want to not mistake the name.
Yep.
I can't find it. But anyway, he's a tough dude, and he had been fighting. He had like 50 fights, right?
Uh-huh.
But he's also like kind of got a jiu-jitsu background. So like they wanted to put me against that guy first fight.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like 50 fights, first fight. It didn't really feel, I didn't get the feel like, hey, like they necessarily had my best interest at heart. I think that they had at heart was, hey, let's put together a fight that a lot of people are going to be interested in,
Yeah.
Great. I get it. But I also have never fought before ever,
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, that's tough. Most people do amateurs, don't they? You're like straight onto a big show,
Sure.
And then against someone who's got 50 fights, it's hanging you out to dry there, really, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I don't really think they had negative. I don't think the point was going to be to lose or anything. I think that in their heads, they genuinely thought that it was it was going to be a tough matchup, and it probably would have been. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I think just with the jiu-jitsu skills that I have, even without really understanding MMA, like there's probably a lot of people I could just walk into a ring and pressure forward and submit them. Don't get me wrong. I'm not denying that it's not possible. Like I have all the confidence in the world. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, I just don't think it's the smartest move. You know what I mean? Like that's not the way I wanted to go. So anyway, they were the only people other than one to ever really talk to me. As far as one's concerned, the way that happened was I think I got they wanted to kind of talk to me a little bit, so they set me up with a seminar at Evolve, and I was just jiu-jitsu over there. So I started teaching jiu-jitsu at Evolve, or actually, I think it was. I think I came for a seminar. I might have just come to visit. I'm not 100% sure. It might have just been. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was a seminar though. But either way, I come to teach or I just come to visit or whatever, and they wanted to set up some sort of conversation between me and Chatri and one. So they talked to me a little bit, and then I think that at the time I wasn't 100% ready to just jump on board with fighting. Like I hadn't really been training or anything like that. So they said, hey, listen, why don't we have your first introduction to the organization be a grappling match? Like we want to start putting on. We don't want to just do MMA. We're going to do like all different kinds of martial arts, and we want to do them at the highest level. That's our dream. We want this organization to do all different kinds of combat, because they were doing Muay Thai fights. They're doing MMA. They did some kickboxing, right? So they're like, let's throw a grappling match on there, right? So they have Shinya Aoki and he's a very tough jiu-jitsu competitor. So they set me up with that. I come back, I do the grappling match with Shinya. I get a feel for the organization. And like, man, I just started to develop relationships with all these guys, that work within the organization, and it felt comfortable. And nobody else really took the time to do any of that, and that's, okay. So yeah, that's kind of the way that I found myself over there. I mean, other than that, I would say, the other reason why I wouldn't just go sign up with like the UFC or something is like, the way I saw it, like not having any fights prior, it's like, let's say everything goes super awesome. Right. And I just like keep winning. Now it's like, okay, I'm fighting, the best in the world on like, fight 4 or 5 or something, or like somebody in the top 5 in the UFC. And it's like, I don't know if that's enough skill development time, right? Like I kind of saw it as like, hey, like, most of the guys that have the title, right?
Yep.
As a pro have over 10 fights.
Yeah.
I would say much more likely have over 15 fights.
Mm-hmm.
Some more than that before they get the title. Some around 20 pro fights. But I would say 15 is probably at a bare minimum. Okay. Now, all of those guys also had amateur careers. So they probably all fought at amateur at least 5 times, right?
Uh-huh.
We were talking about guys with like 25 fights, and I've only had like 5, 6 fights. It's a little aggressive, you know? It's like a little hard to just jump into an environment like that. So, you know, whether it was working with one or working with like a pro organization in the US that was like a Ring of Combat or something like that we have over here is like similar to your like Cage Warriors, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, I could have done something like that as well and stayed a little closer to home. But again, you know, these guys, you know, built a good relationship with me and it felt like a good fit. And it seemed like I was going to be able to get fights, you know, very quickly, which was one of my main concerns, which we're struggling with now, but it's not really their fault, you know?
Yeah. They've got the show in Bangkok, haven't they? Next, which is coming soon. I don't know how they'll get on with fighters coming in. I'm trying to get back. I live in Thailand normally, so I'm trying to get back there, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen. Just one quick question before we go. What was it like going over to Yas Island?
Oh, it was kind of cool, man. You know, I liked it. Super hot. You can't really be outside for very long, but. But initially, it's like a little weird with the quarantine stuff. Like you're just kind of trapped in a room. You know, we were trapped in a room in Vegas for a day while we get our test results back. Then we're trapped 2 days when we get there. So that was like uncomfortable. You're just kind of pacing back and forth in a hotel room, which is weird.
Yep.
But it was a cool experience. You know, it was very professionally run, like all the testing and everything like that. So that was kind of cool. We got all of our food paid for and stuff in the hotel. So you know, that was good. And then like there was little things set up around the island that you could do, even though there's like basically nobody there but fighters. So it was kind of cool. They had a racetrack and they had golfing and things like you had to pay extra to do those sorts of things, but they had it available. So there was some fun stuff you could do like while you were out there. So, you know, also, you know, the competition went relatively well. I was there to corner Ryan Benoit and I thought he did really well in his fight. I mean, he didn't win, you know, decision didn't go in his favor, but split this or not. So I think it was, so what do you call it? I don't know if you call it a split decision. You would say, so it was unanimous decision, but it was only by like a point, right? So it's like 29-28 or something, right?
Yeah.
So close fight, right?
Close.
Like, not like it was, you know, not like he got killed. Really could have gone either way, I think. I mean, a lot of people thought what I thought and thought that he won. But, you know, when you look it back, the other guy had a lot of volume. I didn't really think he did too much damage. But anyway, you know, all of the things that I felt like I was responsible for in that fight, like the grappling exchanges, I think he did very, very well. And at the very least did better than he's done previously in previous fights. He had a great submission attempt. He was able to very quickly shake off all of his opponent's takedown attempts, which was, you know, there was only one takedown I think his opponent scored. Ryan scored his own takedown, got out of submission danger multiple times. So like, I mean, I have no real complaints there. I also cornered a buddy of mine last minute, Jared Gordon. Did really well as well in his fight. He dominated. So that was a win for him. So I was very happy to see that. And I think some of the stuff we worked on, even a very short period of time, like a week that we had, really like 4 or 5 days, shown through in that fight because we worked on guillotine defense and stuff. And that guy tried to guillotine him. So, you know, I felt very good. You know, I feel like as a mixed martial arts coach, which is something that I aspire to be one day, which is part of the reason that I fight to begin with. I felt like I'm developing as a mixed martial arts coach, and I have I'm starting to see progress in athletes that I'm coaching. So it's kind of cool to see because it builds confidence in me that that I have a future in that, you know, I'm competent in some way, and I'm not gonna, you know, I'm not just in over my head with the idea of coaching in MMA because I question myself sometimes, man. You know, it's not I build confidence in things, but it takes time. Like I have to see things like actually work out for me to be confident. Like some people are just delusionally confident. Like they just fucking awesome at everything. Just like I'd love to be that way. I really would, but it just doesn't work that way for me. Like I have to see some sort of results. So it's helpful, man. You know, and every step of the way, the more I build confidence and that sort of thing, I think the better coach I'm going to become, because I'm going to be a little bit more assertive and feel like I know what I'm talking about. You know.
We've got an hour now. I don't want to make you late, man. I could sit and chat with you all day, man. Pick your brains. Hopefully, I can catch you when you're over in Asia at some point and take you for a beer.
Yeah, man, absolutely. We'd love that.
Yeah, thanks very much for your time. Honestly, I really, really appreciate it. So,
sorry for the initial hang when because I think I was trying to get a hold of you to do the podcast or whatever it is we're doing much earlier. So sorry that it didn't work out right away. But
no problem, man. I've got all the time in the world at the moment. I'm not working or anything, so your time's more precious than mine. So, anyone you want to shout out? Any sponsors or anything, just in case people are watching?
I have a couple different sponsors. CB Distillery is a big one for me that we've had for a while. Chimera Coffee works with me. I don't have a major MMA or Nogi apparel brand at the moment. So if anyone's interested, by all means, reach out. I'm more than happy to have a conversation with you guys. I'm looking to work with somebody. I have my own apparel brand called Cash Chicks Championships, which the site's been down for a little bit, but we're looking to pick that back up again. So let me know if anybody wants to reach out and is interested in any of that kind of products. That's great. And then, of course, my two BJJ Fanatics Jiu-Jitsu DVDs that are out now. I have Exit the System, which is like a submission escape and counterattack DVD, which I think that's probably my best DVD. A lot of people are raving about that one. They really like it a lot, especially considering all this information that Danaher and Gordon have put out there about submitting people. You might want to into things to kind of know how to get out of that stuff. So, that's been very good. But I would love it if more people got a hold of that. And then I have another one, which is relatively unique. It's kind of the first of its kind, the DVD, which is, it's called Shoot to Kill, Scramble, Wrestle, Submit, or Wrestle, Scramble, Submit, something like that. And and basically the idea is to integrate standing grappling with submissions. So to find a way to go from standing to the submission as quickly and efficiently as possible. And I think that's a relatively revolutionary DVD where it integrates the standing in the ground quite well. Whereas most people tend to just do a DVD on stand-up or do a DVD on grappling. And I kind of try to integrate the two, which was quite difficult for myself. So you can get the hold of that DVD and watch me rack my own brain to figure out how to connect all those dots. And I think, in the future, that's what I'm going to continue to do. I try to find my own niche, and the niche that I'm trying to exploit is the transition between different areas of grappling. So far I've done escapes to attacks and standing stuff to attacks, and I'd like to continue on that path. I'll probably do something like sweeps to attacks or passes to attacks. Moving forward, it'll probably be the next thing that I'm thinking about, or I'll just do something completely different. We'll see.
Okay, good luck with that, man. And thanks very much. Peace out, bro. Take care, man. Bye-bye.